let's pivot to Brady as you bring him up. There are those who are saying in the Boston media, they subscribe to the theory that Tom is a little bit of a sellout. The new Tom is, a little into social media, a little goofy, is not paying respect, to sort of his historic, his greater half, which is the New England half. I've argued this, that he suppressed a lot of his personality in New England for the betterment of the organization, and this is really who Tom is. Tom's kind of funny. Tom is wildly competitive. He just bumped Bruce Arians to a job he never wanted, a cubicle upstairs. He's a lot more cutthroat than we think. Hyper vigilant and willful. That's who he is. But Tom also, especially early in New England, suppressed it because he realized very quickly, this is a great owner, and this is the best coach in the history of football, and my defenses are remarkable. Which is the truth? Is this the real Tom? Is the other guy the real Tom? What do you make of his transformation in Tampa?
Well, it's interesting. He left the ranks of the normal human being a long time ago when he just completely went off the rails with this regimen of his and the whole TB12 thing and claiming that you could will your way away from concussions and come on, Tom, let's get real here. That surfaced, but you're right. This some of this other stuff came out after he got away from Bill, and now if you read the two books that are out, The Dynasty and by Jeff Benedict and the Better to Be Feared book, and it's pretty evident that he was happy to get away from Bill after all these years. He had done enough winning with Bill, and he had enough of Bill's methodology, and he wanted to get away from Bill. But you're right, there probably was a more of a I won't say carefree, but mirthful personality than he was ever allowed to or chose to display in Boston. So I think you're probably on the right track with that.
Pete Carroll has a lot of power when Paul Allen died, and the Seahawk drafts have gotten progressively worse the more power Pete Carroll had. Belichick historically is a terrible drafter the more power he had, especially of skill people. Last year he had his best draft in a decade, arguably, because it was documented that he sort of relinquished some of his power. Bill will always be as smart as any coach I've ever seen. But the league is now, Bob, as you see clearly, moving in a different direction. The middle of the field is now the offenses. You can't hit quarterbacks or wide receivers. The NFC, every playoff team had an offensive coach. If you eliminate the AFC East that had only defensive coaches, 7 of 8 remaining divisions were won by an offensive coach. Mm-hmm. McVay's, Zach Taylor's, the young coaches, McVay's tree, they're all working. Belichick's defensive tree, many aren't working. Is it reasonable to say, as brilliant as Bill is, that between drafting and the cultural changes, Bill is starting, he's going to be his own coordinator now, offensively, according to reports. Bill's starting, not Jurassic, but feeling a tad outdated. There are cultural changes. Greg Popovich faced this. It's more, letting Kawhi go in petty fashion. They've never really recovered from that. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's fair to say, I see Bill and I think, not that he's Bobby Knight,
no,
right, who refused to embrace the one and done. But he feels C.J. Jackson or J.C. Jackson.
Jackson was
like Bill. He's arguably your best player. Shaq Mason, arguably your best offensive lineman. He's starting to feel a little outdated, Bob.
There's a clear sense of arrogance that has manifested itself here, that he thinks he can do it the way he did it. And you mentioned that he's just lost his offensive coordinator, and we don't know how that's going to evolve this year. And you're right, the coaching tree of his is pretty undistinguished. Including McDaniel's first foray, when he flopped in Denver. No, there's an arrogance there, and believe me, people are watching all these major things happen around the league and in the division, and starting in Buffalo, where now they have the kid. Bill had the kid. Yeah. Bill had the guy for damn near 20 years. They have the guy now. Think about this. I know you know this, but for people to think about this, a stunning thing. And you wonder if it was anybody else, if it would have Buffalo. They played Buffalo twice in the end, and they never punted. They never forced Buffalo off the field. Not once. Not once in 120 minutes of football did they force Buffalo off the field. I mean, that was chill. It's stunning. So no, you're right. There's an arrogance there, and you know what the famous Lord Acton quote is: "Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely." So if he hangs around long enough, now he's going to be 70 his next birthday, and that's a decision Bob Kraft is. What's Bob Kraft seeing? What's he thinking? Bob Kraft has been able to function for all these years in Bill I trust. Let Bill do what he wants. Bill runs everything the way Bill wants to run it. Fine. Bill can be an ass after a game, and that's fine. Embarrass the organization, that's fine. We'll get the benefit in the end. But maybe the benefits aren't going to be so good from now. But I think that I'd love to know what Bob Kraft, how close attention is he really paying to all this?
Well, he said at the owner meetings.
Right. I'm tired of 3 years. Yeah. Okay, fine. But what does that mean? All right, fine. Well, so how are you going to affect this or affect this? I don't know. You're right. He did say that. So clearly, publicly, he says that. But meanwhile, what's he saying behind closed doors? I'd love to know.
You understand the temperature of not only the room in Boston, but you have certainly a holistic understanding of sports nationally. I mean, look at the media world that's changed since you started. Barstool Sports emanated from Boston, Bill Simmons. I mean, it's fascinating because you said you're a baseball guy, and I went to college, and my dream was to be Vin Scully. Mm-hmm. And even though the Mariners were awful, my dream was always to be a baseball announcer. And then the truth was there were very few openings at the major league level, and announcers' kids were getting the jobs, and my dad was a local optometrist.
One begin with a B?
Well, Buck and Brenneman, as you know. I mean, and they're all very talented. But I can see the writing on the wall. There were a lot more local TV and local radio openings. Mm-hmm. Boston is one of the 2 or 3 or 4 great American baseball cities. New York, Boston, St. Louis, Detroit. Because of analytics, Bob, I think analytics have helped football. There's less punting. The game is faster, more offensive. Analytics in baseball, it's strikeouts or home runs. There's fewer hits, fewer base runners. Now, you're a baseball guy.
Yes.
But do you sense, even in Boston, it's a harder sell to young people, and it's a harder sell unless the team's really good?
No question. And
you do.
And if baseball, sure. And if baseball Inc. does MLB doesn't recognize this, but I think they are getting the message now. There's the shift is going to be interesting. They haven't addressed that directly now, but apparently they're thinking about actually, mandating, positioning of the players on the field.
Yeah.
In the next year. Oh, the 3-outcome baseball is everybody talks about it now. You have to be aware of it, and it's not with and the pitching, the third time around the rotation. Starting pitchers going 5 innings max now. It's not the same game, and I think it's people are recognizing that. But the whole young people thing. This has been going on, for years. The idea of the and yet I look at the ballpark when you go to the game. You do see people bring their kids. There's still a lot of young people, and even and young 20-somethings. Who obviously they're the ones that are going taking themselves. They're spending the money. They're still coming to the ballpark here in ways. But again, look at what's happening in the state of Florida. Those 2 franchises are woeful. I mean, I don't know, if it's just because of for whatever reason, but I can't relate to this, So
yeah, I mean, look at the coverage of Boston media in the Boston Globe, the Boston Herald, the local TV stations, the Hub. If you went WEEI, if you went to all, aggregate all the media coverage in Boston, mm-hmm. How much is Patriots? How much Celtics? How much Red Sox?
Well, it used to be in the old days. It was true 20 years ago, and maybe even up to 10 years ago. Well, that you could write, but you had obligation almost to write something about baseball 365 days a year in the Boston paper. And now that's flipped. It's the Patriots. They're the currency. They're one. It's 1, and Boston, the Red Sox are 2, and not even 1A, which it's because of the Patriots. Now, how this is going to manifest itself if the Patriots slide, in 2022, and the Red Sox have a good season, as at least equivalent to the one they had last year when they made a good run at it. It could flip back. But they're 1 and 2, and then the other 2 depends now on who's better, right now, but they're close to still hockey town at heart. I still think in a winter. I really believe that. We had to run the Bird era, but after the Bird era ended, it receded somewhat. And the Bruins, if they have a good season, the Bruins still command a lot of attention. It is an amazing sports town in that regard. I'm so glad I wound up here, went to college here, and that's where I went up working. It's been an incredible place to work. And we've had, of course, in the 21st century, it's been our golden era. Nobody's had more championships and more parades than Boston. Although LA's closing in.
Yeah.
They get to count. They shouldn't count Anaheim, though. I'm going to want to go on the record. That is a separate market. But anyway,
yeah, it's still, LA is having a renaissance. Lincoln Riley here for USC. The Clippers, the Dodgers, and the Rams have really, really strong front offices. Even the Chargers now draft really, really well. I've never seen anything like it. I live in Los Angeles, Bob. We just got Bobby Wagner.
Mm-hmm.
If you listed the 20, and I won't even count the Angels, I won't count Mike Trout, I won't count him. If you took the 20 biggest athletes in LA County,
mm-hmm.
I think Paul George, a 6 or 7 time All-Star, would be 20th.
Wow.
He's probably number 2 in most markets, maybe 3.
Mm.
If I said today, who are the 3 or 4 biggest athletes in Boston?
Mm-hmm.
Who are they?
Well, with who gone, there's no one Patriot that stands out. So
there isn't.
I'll tell you what. The first thing that comes to mind is Patrice Bergeron, and hockey. Xander Bogaerts is the best Red Sox player. And he's a very personable person. Jason Tatum is certainly very popular, I would say. And it's funny because I mentioned the Patriots as an entity are still the number 1 team, but I can't identify who is the number 1 personality or player that you think of when you think of the Patriots any longer at all. Devin McCourty, who's an elder statesman, Matthew Slater, they're wonderful guys, but their position, one's a career, Slater is a special teams guy and McCourty's a defensive back. Those don't. But so I'd have to say Bogaerts, Bergeron, Tatum, those are the 3 names that jump out at me.
It's interesting. Belichick had said years ago, and this is something I think Robert Kraft has to look at. Belichick said years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, he was only going to acquire, draft, or trade for players he wanted to coach. It's like, okay, be very careful. Okay, some of the great players you may not love coaching. I heard one of the reasons that they let J.C. Jackson walk is because they didn't think if they franchise tagged him, they thought he would be difficult.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I think to myself, Bill, sometimes great players are difficult. This is the interesting thing with Belichick. When he said that, they had Brady and they were winning. But this is the Greg Popovich connection here,
mm-hmm.
is that not everybody is going to buy into your culture, but sometimes you need a great pass rusher and you need a great wide receiver because, and that's where I am a little fearful that Belichick, he's got his legacy, he's got his net worth. Bob, he doesn't, here's too much power.
He won't let go because he loves every aspect of his job. He loves it all. Like he's in glory. He's in his glory. Colin, right now, he loves preparing for the draft. He loves it. He loves everything about coaching. He likes OTAs. He likes training camp. He likes Sundays, Monday nights. He likes but the only thing he doesn't like, and even this is misunderstood, is the dealings with the media. He can manipulate it the way he wants. He gets better and better as the week goes on. That's a whole other story. The Belichick that you see on Sunday after a game or Monday night after a game is not the same Belichick you get on Friday when he's relaxed and is open to discussion about a lot of things. The man loves football. I would dare say no coach in the history of the league has had more football empirical knowledge stored in his head, which includes history, than anybody. He's the number 1 football person that's ever coached in the NFL in terms of empirical knowledge about football. I say he knows more about Paul Brown than Mike Brown does. I mean, and that's not just a joke, that's a throwaway line, but that's to prove a point. But the point is, he loves it all, and there's no sign he loves it any less now as he approaches 70 than he did 5, 10, or 15 years ago or when he was winning. So he's going to be hard to let dislodge. I think your inference is completely accurate. But now this is where Bob Kraft comes in. Can Bob Kraft, how's he handle this? And that's going to be very, very interesting. By the way, I want to just back up to this prior discussion just to make a point that you're talking about who's the most popular athlete in Boston right now. Since 1925, when Eddie Shore showed up, and not including World War II when people were in the Army, although we had people, great players serving their country, both the USA and Canada. The city of Boston, the sports teams, has never, since been without at least one drop-dead first ballot Hall of Famer in one of the major sports. We have had a complete continuum since 1925. Because who is it now? Well, it's Bergeron. He's the walk-in. He's the drop-dead hockey one. We're down to one, but it's an incredible run. Now, I'm not saying no other city can make that statement. I bet New York would make a run, but I doubt that. I'm willing to bet that categorically that no other city can make that statement.